This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how did the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to gain and have such a material motive for putting in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come about what's to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader?
I don't remember his name.
You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Deanna Spagnola, who I think republished this from somebody named E.P. Heidner. It was kind of this like pseudonym for it. Came out around 2009, 2010, and so this basically casts 9/11 as an elaborate cover-up of the very same enterprise that we've mentioned before that was at the heart of the Iran-Contra enterprise that was both involved in like drug trafficking, sponsoring the very Islamic terrorists that ostensibly would do the attack in 2001, and most importantly were involved in a secret operation to financially destroy the Soviet Union and destroy actually existing communism in the Eastern Bloc. So I'll just read a little here. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush began the multi-billion-dollar Project Hammer program using an investment strategy to bring about the economic destruction of the Soviet Union, including the theft of the Soviet treasury, destabilization of the ruble, funding a KGB coup against Gorbachev in August 91, and the seizure of major energy and munitions industries in the Soviet Union. These resources would subsequently be turned over to international bankers and corporations. On November 1st, 2001, the second operative in the Bush regime, President George W. Bush, issued Executive Order 13233 on the basis of national security and concealed the records of past presidents, especially his father's spurious activities during 1990 and 91. Consequently, those records are no longer accessible to the public. The Russian coup plot was discussed in June 91 when Yeltsin visited with Bush in conjunction with his visit to the United States. On the same visit, Yeltsin met discreetly with Gerald Corrigan, the chairman of the New York Fed. Because of numerous presidential executive orders, the ethically questionable Project Hammer was deemed legal. Of course, even Hitler's acts were lawful, as he had manipulated the laws to accommodate his actions. Many of Reagan's executive orders were actually authored by Vice President Bush or his legal associates, and it's possible that Project Hammer was created by Reagan's CIA Director William Casey, who had directed OSS operations through Allen Dulles in Europe during World War II. Prior to his OSS affiliation, Casey worked for the Board of Economic Warfare, which allegedly targeted Hitler's economic jugular. And I'm just going to go down. So you're saying, okay, this is all weird, but what does this have to do with 9/11? So the Vulcans, who were George H.W. Bush's foreign policy counsels like Condoleezza Rice and I think Richard Pearl, who were hatching the secret plan to crush communism, was largely initially funded by what was called Yamashita's gold, which was a stash of stolen Japanese treasure that was hidden in the Philippines at the end of World War II and then was discovered by the Americans and was used to prop up the Ferdinand Marcos regime for decades, and was used basically off the books to support covert operations against communism around the world for the entire Cold War. And if you look into white-collar crime and CIA money laundering, a lot of it does kind of lead back to what was called alternatively the Black Eagle Trust or Yamashita's gold, and it was something that was outside of congressional oversight and et cetera, and it plugs in with like so many people that I can't go into it right now, but George H.W. Bush was like in the mix. So during the process of accomplishing the main objective of destroying the Soviet Union with this dirty money, the operatives made massive profits. In September 91, George H.W. Bush and Alan Greenspan, both Pilgrim Society members, another secret society, financed $240 billion in illegal bonds to economically decimate the Soviet Union and bring Soviet oil and gas resources under the control of Western investors, backed by the Black Eagle Trust and supported later by Putin, who for the right price purged certain oligarchs. The $240 billion in illegal bonds were apparently replaced with treasury notes backed by U.S. taxpayers. To conceal the clearance of $240 billion in fraudulent securities, the Federal Reserve within 2 months increased the money supply to pre-9/11 numbers, which resulted in the American taxpayer refinancing the $240 billion. And basically the idea was that this $240 billion in fraudulent securities created by Bush and Greenspan were created on September 10th, 1991, and used to destroy the Soviet Union, and basically were going to come due for payout on September 11th, 2001. But then these planes miraculously come out of nowhere and fly right into, they hit the two biggest securities brokers, Cantor Fitzgerald, Euro Brokers, and Garbon Intercapital. Flight 11 struck just under the floors where Cantor Fitzgerald was located. Cantor Fitzgerald, with possible connections to U.S. intelligence apparatus, was America's biggest securities broker and apparently the main target. Within minutes, an explosion in the North Tower's vacant 23rd floor, right under the offices of the FBI and Garbon Intercapital on the 25th floor, caused a huge fire from the 22nd to the 25th floors. At the same time, there was an explosion in the basement of the North Tower. A vault in the North Tower basement held less than $1 billion in gold, much of which was reportedly moved before 9/11. However, the government had hundreds of billions of dollars of securities which were summarily destroyed. The Federal Reserve, untouched by the crisis at its downtown offices, they had backed everything up to a remote location, assumed emergency powers that afternoon. The $240 billion in securities was electronically cleared. Then, at 9:03, Flight 175 slammed into the 78th floor of the South Tower, just below the 84th floor where Euro Brokers were located. Brian Clark, the manager at Euro Brokers, heard numerous explosions, apparently unrelated to what he referred as the oxygen-starved fire caused by the plane crash. The September 11th attacks related to the financial improprieties during the preceding 10 years, which spurred at least 9 federal investigations, which were initiated in 97-98, about the same time that Osama bin Laden, after 20 years as a CIA asset, announced a fatwa against the U.S. The records of many of those investigations were held in Building 6 and 7 and on the 23rd floor of the North Tower. Those investigations were sure to reveal the Black Eagle Trust shenanigans. Building 7, not hit by a plane, collapsed at 5:20 p.m., but was vacated as early as 9 a.m. when evacuees claimed to see dead bodies and sporadic fires within the buildings. By 2008 and even earlier, the covert securities were worth trillions. The securities used to decimate the Soviets and end the Cold War were stored in certain brokers' vaults in the World Trade Center, where they were destroyed on September 11th. They would have come due for settlement and clearing on September 12th. The federal agency investigating those bonds, the Office of Naval Intelligence, was in the section of the Pentagon that was destroyed on September 11th. And renovations at the Pentagon were due to be completed on September 16th. However, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the entity that often monitors war games, was hurriedly moved. If they were monitoring the simultaneous war games that morning, they would have realized the games were used as a distraction from the actual assault. Whatever hit the Pentagon struck the Navy Command Center and the offices of the Chief of Naval Operations Intelligence Plot. There were 125 fatalities in the Pentagon. 31% of them were people who worked in the Naval Command Center, the location of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and 39 of the 40 people who worked in the O&I died. Yeah, that was a lot there, but basically this was like basically a way to simultaneously cover up the extremely wicked and illegal and like highly criminal financial crimes that were done by like the first Bush administration to destroy the Soviet Union. And it's like this bill was going to come due in 2001. So in a way, I guess George W. Bush had to be the president, and then these I think it is interesting that but of course we don't have any proof that $240 billion in illegal securities was in fact created. We do know they did. Yeah, go ahead.
My big thing is like, what would the real consequences have been if, like, assuming that all this is true, like, I'm not sure about like Yamashita's gold and all that stuff. Maybe, like, maybe they.
We'll get to that when we do gold. Mark Lombardi. That there was really hard interlocks between those kind of those networks. But anyways.
Yeah. But okay. Well, anyway, my big thing is like, what would, because as this author said previously, like a lot of it was considered legal. Like a lot of it could be because they of course make the laws, and most people, I think that if you found out that they used like unscrupulous financial means to destroy the Soviet Union, most Americans would be like, okay, good. So
well,
would the consequences of those coming due really have been so catastrophic that it justified 9/11? That's like, I don't. And also, like, it kind of mixes up with if you're saying this is controlled demolition, like, the whole idea that the planes hit the exact offices, like, that, where these files were held, that almost seems like an unnecessary clue. Where, like, if the whole building is going to collapse anyway because they've wired it with thermite or whatever, then it's going to be destroyed no matter what.
Just to be devil's advocate, I would say that they hit, both planes hit slightly below, or either directly or directly below the offices that they wanted to supposedly target. So that would have basically trapped the people in those offices. It would either killed them instantly, destroyed their computers and their records, or it would have trapped them all up there so that they wouldn't be able to escape. And, maybe... there could be, and also in the basement there was a lot of securities records, so they would have had to basically it's like if you're going to pick a place to hit the building, you'd hit the most high value target on that building, but then you'd still have to bring it down to destroy all the records or create the excuse for the Federal Reserve to make an exception, for the first time ever and electronically clear things without having physical evidence of them. So in a way, it was almost like clearing the books, like clearing the old books of all the dirt that the Bushes had done through Iran-Contra and probably even earlier, and then starting a whole new era that was electronically recorded that was probably much easier to manipulate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's the first time ever that we know, I definitely could see, like, that there were, like, I find it very believable that there was, like, a secret fund that was used, like, to subvert, like, the financial solvency of the Soviet Union. That seems like 100%. Like, it would be almost unbelievable if that weren't the case. Like, whether we can talk later about whether it was financed by Yamashita's gold, like, and
well, also like yes, like, drug trafficking, things like that.
That makes more. But what I would say, like, it just seems to me that there might have been like a more like effective way to deal with that than through doing. I don't know if that in and of itself justifies 9/11, like just from like a practical, like realpolitik point of view, if that would be the best way to deal with that. Like,
I'll give you this in towards like that line of thinking, that the Bushes were so good at bureaucratic rat fuckery and compartmentalizing what they were doing and evade. I mean, they did kind of mostly get away with Iran-Contra. It dinged their reputations a little bit, but the worst stuff of it never really came out and never got definitively tied to Bush, even though he was deeply involved in it. So I think, if you were going to cast doubt on this, it'd be like, another Bush just became president. Surely there had to be some way to kind of stonewall these investigations within the military that a Bush controlled, or whether it's the FBI or the CIA. They certainly have had no problem covering things up in the past, and keeping things compartmentalized, and even telling like the O&I investigators to like back off, or the Treasury Department or whoever it was. I think that part maybe is something they could have managed, but then maybe as a counterpoint to that, the idea of doing this kind of spectacular mind war operation to change the consciousness of the American people to be ready for a whole new century of war and conquest and like imperialism in a much more aggressive way that America was not fully down with before 9/11. That would have been something that would have been maybe very appealing to kind of not just cover up what they had done in the past, but continue and expand their plans and do it with like a clean slate. Now nobody's going to ask about, it took years of Bush being a kind of chaotic, horrible president in the 2000s for people to kind of start circling back to Iran-Contra and his dad. A lot of people would even like favorably compare HW to W and like, oh, well, he was moderate and like respectable and like we've mentioned before. And like, why is his son such a dummy? And I think, perhaps that was a little bit of a put on the kind of bumbling Texan caricature. And that, I'm sure that H.W. Bush was more involved in the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, than he let on. Like, I just, we don't talk on the phone much. We don't really, he doesn't really give me advice. It's like, dude, he was the fucking president. It's like not even weird that he would give you advice, but like they always manage to make it seem very, like I'm not being a helicopter parent, like telling him how to be president. But of course, all the people around Bush were like, were HW loyalists that were implicated, played various parts in like Iran-Contra and the whole 80s, Reagan kind of, wing of like American power. And they knew how all the systems worked. They knew how to move in the bureaucracies. And like, I don't even know how necessary it was that George W. Bush was like fully read in on everything. But I'm sure that he, kind of had some kind of awareness, given his father's proximity to so much evil covert shit. So I don't know. I can't say for sure. I wish somebody had done more like digging into that. That's a theory that popped out in like 2010. And then I sort of never heard. The only other place I've kind of seen it is in the book Interlock, which is about Mark Lombardi, who definitely want to do a whole episode on him. He was the conceptual artist that in many ways like traced, used art to trace the financial, covert financial networks of people in the Bush family and in CIA front companies, and did a lot of work on things like Yamashita's Gold and Iran-Contra, and then was like mysteriously found dead at like the height of his fame in, I think, the end of 2000, while Bush was, early 2000 when Bush was running for president. And then, of course, 9/11 happened a year later. But in that book, they mentioned that within his research, or actually not his research, but people that have looked at his drawings have kind of made this connection to the sort of Project Hammer theory of, targeting specific these buildings which held like the paper records that to some extent represented this like mass criminal malfeasance. I mean, if you tried to push $240 billion through the securities markets that were fraudulent, I imagine that would be disruptive and like too big to just kind of paper over unless there was a bigger crisis happening on top of it. So I still don't know exactly. I mean, does the chairman of the Federal Reserve like have the right to like sign a piece of paper and do that? It seems like they're doing it all the time nowadays. They can just kind of make up money and give it to a bank, or lend it out in kind of weird ways. But maybe it was kind of, a little bit less sophisticated.
I could definitely see the reverse where one is the opportunity for the other. Like if already, 9/11 has happened and maybe like certain documents or whatever are being destroyed, like, and even if we're saying like, even if we say that it's the same people who have orchestrated 9/11 for other reasons, like you mentioned, like maybe, it's maybe it's this meticulously planned occult ritual, or maybe it's something that's more of a psyop, or both, I guess, because we've really talked about the link between these two domains. But for whatever reason, like, I think after, like, whatever you think about the actual events of 9/11, I think after the fact it makes sense. As a justification in itself, like, it just seems like a lot, like, for that to be the reason for it. But I think that it's interesting because I think that there's something about the design and the character of 9/11 that like makes this type of like that fuels this type of speculation and these type of ideas about like, you know, trying to pin down like who was responsible. And I think that it often like like when you come up with these answers like and these sort of motivations, again, like what SK Bain comes up with is so grandiose, but it almost like that is what feels viscerally like it fits in a way that it, like that's the kind of stuff that feels suited to the magnitude of what like we experienced. And
it has a Dracularity to it.
Yeah, exactly.
That we recognize.
Yeah, it has a
as intuitively kind of real.
Yeah, because basically more or less the culprit of 9/11, according to SK Bain, is Dracula, or like worse, is Satan. You know, like so, you know, or Satan's direct
the devotees of Satan.
Exactly. Under his direction. You know, so the idea of that like is that's more satisfying in some way, because I think that there's something, whether or not, you know, one believes that or one like, you know, subscribes to the idea, I think that there's something to the fact that the other explanations, they usually seem inadequate in some way. They usually feel like not quite sufficient, like, you know, when we're...
They somehow add up to less than like the sum of their parts.
Yeah.
Even if you have all of these data points, you know, listed of all the strange anomalies and all these different things, it kind of adds up to still, it doesn't feel like an intuitively kind of complete narrative. There's still these big dark gaps of kind of, you know, I think it's just so far beyond our understanding that people within kind of the most secret reaches of a government and business and like the intelligence world and the military could sort of collaborate to bring about such a thing for any reason. It's so kind of overwhelmingly sinister and doesn't map onto our popular conceptions of how any of these institutions are supposed to work.
Yeah.
It's an immense Dracularity.
Yeah, there's an immense Dracularity.
My daddy served in the army. We lost his right eye, but he flew a flag out in our yard. Till the day that he died, he wanted my mother, my brother, my sister, and me to grow up and live happy in the land of the free. Now this nation that I love is falling under attack. A mighty sucker punch came flying in from somewhere in the back. Soon as we could see clearly through our big black eye, man, we lit up your world like the 4th of July. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his list, and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist, and the eagle will fly, and it's gonna be here when you hear Mother Freedom start ringing her bell, and it'll feel like the whole wide world is raining down on you. Brought to you courtesy of the red, white, and blue. Justice will be served and the battle will rage. This big dog will fight when you rattle his cage. And you'll be sorry that you messed with the U.S. of A. Cause we'll put a boot in your ass, it's the American way. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his list, and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist, and the eagle will fly.
And I think that, yeah, there's a sense that, there's something where we feel that these things are in some way, like, you know, a fulfillment even, you know, to his credit, Bill Maher, who's one of the most like loathsome public figures like today, you know, he was one of the people who said like, you know, oh, I feel like we had it coming, which I think he was referring to like U.S. foreign policy, which, you know, fair enough.
Did he say that, or did he say or he also said that he thought that, you know, say what you want, but the hijackers had courage?
Oh, maybe he said that, but I thought that he said that we had it coming in some way. But like,
he might have said that as well.
Yeah, I've always had a little bit of a problem with the characterization of those people as being cowards, because I feel like. But anyway, like, you know, it's funny that that was one of the most popular things. Like, well, like
that got him canceled in 2001 from Politically Incorrect, which weirdly SK Bain actually Bill Maher is mentioned once because the wife of Ted Olson, who was I think a lawyer for the Bush administration and the Bush campaign that was like instrumental in winning Bush v. Gore, which made Bush president. His wife was on a flight to L.A. on 9/11, which was also Ted Olson's birthday, which is weird. But she was on a flight to L.A. to be a guest on a recording of Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect. And so, like, she was supposed to be on Bill Maher's show, but then her plane got hijacked, and she ended up getting flown into the World Trade Center. And she is one of the few people, there were several of these people that made a phone call to her husband, and allegedly, you know, they were able to talk, and he informed her of, like, the buildings were crashing into the World Trade Center, and you know, kind of, like, corroborated, like, the official story of whatever's going on, more or less. But then other people have questioned, like it's very unclear, like, did she use an airplane phone on her seat, or did she use her cell phone when they were at low altitude? Nobody's ever, like, kind of clarified that. SK Bain seems very suspicious of these phone calls.
And I remember Loose Change also was very suspicious. I remember, that's like one of the things I remember most vividly from Loose Change. They only watched once, like, all those years ago. But I remember one guy was like, "Hi, Mom, it's Rob," like, you know, and they were like, "Who identifies themselves to their own mother," or whatever, you know, like,
no, some of the Bain says in the book that, like, according to the interviews with the people who got these calls, they kind of said things that, you know, they innocently described things as kind of like, it was so weird, like, I didn't hear any yelling or crying in the background. It sounded like they were just, like, sitting in a room somewhere, and, like, they weren't even flying, and they sounded really calm.
Yeah,
it was
whoever
like,
got the "Let's Roll" call.
Oh, and lest we forget, "Let's Roll" came from one of those phone calls on Flight 93, where and the woman wrote, like, a best-selling book about it that was called like "Let's Roll," about, like, her husband.
Right, she was the one who was like, he seemed so calm, like there wasn't any yelling, like I wouldn't have even known what was going on. I would have thought it was a crank call or something.
That's what she said. She said she would have thought it was a crank call, which you know, is it's technologically possible, but you know, of course, Michael Aquino says
making a big deal about, like, how those sort of plane call systems were just recently installed or whatever, but
I remember them as a kid. Like, there were phones on. You know, I forget exactly how they would work. They were kind of cumbersome, but you know, like I think in the late '90s, a lot of planes, like especially cross country, had them. So like maybe that was it. But and also the fact that they were able to talk for minutes, which people said. I think in the "Let's Roll" case, it was on a cell phone, and like they said that was a kind of like it was a miracle. Like, you know, because, like, that was so impossible to keep a steady, you know, back in, like, the LTE, like, 1G era of, like, 2001, that was so unlikely that you could get a call flying at any altitude to stay connected for, like, you know, I don't know, 5-7 minutes or something like that was incredibly rare and unlikely, but it must have been, you know, a miracle.
Right, yeah, she said that it was a miracle. But yeah, going back to, sorry, I just want to finish my thought about Bill Maher's comment.
Sure.
I think that there's actually like a broader sense in which that can be taken, which is that, and this kind of goes back to these sort of precognitions that people had of the event. Like, I remember there was like a pulled trailer for the first Spider-Man, which, speaking of like 9/11 era music, has like one of the most amazing hero to save. Yeah, like
the hero could save us.
Not good. Yeah, there was like a pulled. Yeah, there was a I'll hold on to the wings of the Eagles. Yeah.
That was really that kind of that era.
Yeah.
Who's that guy? Saliva, the other guy.
The lead singer right. Saliva. He was the guest star on that because of course it was Nickelback who sang the actual song.
Like I said, a grim era in American music, like 2001, 2002, like really. Yeah. Talk about predictive programming. All this like psychotic, I was listening to "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" this morning because I remember that was like the anthem of like invading Iraq, basically, and how the lead singer like died on his tour bus. Like I think he might have, I don't know, choked on his own vomit or something. Like he drowned. Like just like I don't know. But then I listened to that song. It was like so evil and just like but well produced.
It's
really well produced. Like there's fucking money behind it. Actually, you know who just released an album on September 11th this week? Marilyn Manson.
Oh right, yeah, I was seeing. Yeah. But anyway, there was a pulled trailer for that Spider-Man movie where like a helicopter like was attacked by thugs or whatever, by baddies, and like it like spun out of control, and then it was like caught on a web like right in between the Twin Towers, and they were
that was very iconic.
Yeah, and there was that episode, but ended up of course being pulled. But like there was also that episode years earlier of the X-Files spinoff, The Lone Gunman, where in the pilot that was literally the plot was to crash commercial airliners into the World Trade Center. So there was like a lot
of predictive weird like the idea that in the 9/11 Commission report that like all these CIA guys said like it was a failure of imagination. There was literally a Tom Clancy novel from like I think the mid 90s that it wasn't about the World Trade Center, but it was about basically a terrorist. I can't remember if it was an Islamic terrorist, but probably would have been, who hijacks a commercial airliner and flies it into the Capitol during the State of the Union address and like kills most of the U.S. government.
Oh yeah, like a designated survivor type situation, kind of. Yeah,
it was like designated survivor basically. Yeah. And then like Jack Ryan has to uncover the plot, and so like spooks love reading Tom Clancy books. They really. So I find it hard to believe that nobody at Langley caught that one and had their imagination just failed. To conceive of it. It's and then what else?
I remember there was some hip hop album that was
the Coup. Actually, it was
the Coup.
Interestingly, Boots Riley, who's now like the sort of communist filmmaker du jour. Sorry to Bother You. Who
they were like smacking their drumsticks together, and then the World Trade Center like blew up. But they're a symbol of like capitalist like global domination. So like obviously like for someone of that sensibility, like it would be and I think that there's like on some level a subconscious idea of like that this is like asking for like that these symbols are like people know that these are provocative, that like these are like something that like is representative of sort of a deep like sin or pollution in American culture, I think that like and it has to do a lot with how people processed like the culprits and processed like the challenge of Islam as being like the new kind of the new great enemy, the new communist, like the new sort of Cold War threat, like people processing this kind of spiritual challenge. Like I think that there is kind of a sense of like the way that was shaped, I think was kind of like unconscious kind of acting out of America's like spiritual poverty that caused us to like latch on so much to that idea of the critique, because like as you mentioned earlier, like the culprits, like from what we know, weren't exactly like the most pious Muslims. Like neither was, Bin Laden obviously did style himself like that way, but
he was also like a rich kid boomer from the second richest family in Saudi Arabia who like went off to like do the equivalent of kind of joining an ashram, but it happened to be like serving with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan.
100%.
Yeah. And
like, no, he's
that's how I see him, as kind of this aloof kind of wannabe ascetic kind of boomer idealist who and it bears mentioning mentioning, and Bain quotes this in the book, that like he resolutely denied having anything to do with 9/11 like after it happened.
And he, like, his library had all those books of like 9/11 conspiracy literature like in it.
Yeah, and like Illuminati. People were making fun of like his porn collection recently. That gets trotted out every few years, but like it's really fascinating when they released, and I mean grain of salt because it's like the military releasing this, but there were a ton of books they claimed in his possession that were all about like who really did 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
and
amazing.
like, you know, he's sitting there in his little compound, like basically a prisoner. And reading like how did he get fingered for the like how did he get suckered, kind of like, you know, Lee Harvey Oswald a little bit into becoming the scapegoat.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I've definitely heard some various takes on his, like, on the released list of books that he had in his porn collection and stuff. Obviously, people have been like, no, he didn't really have porn. Like, that's, you know, slander on OVL. But, yeah, like, no, I think it's interesting. I think it has to do with how people processed ISIS as well and, like, all that stuff. Yeah, it's seen as, like, oh, you know, like, this is a challenge to, like, modernity, you know, like, because people know, like, if people have this sense that our modern way of life is, like, unsustainable in various ways, or, like, we're separated from spirituality, but, like, so they see these threats as being, like, an expression of that, but really, like, the perpetrators of certain Bin Laden and also, like, you know, ISIS, those are very much, like, modern phenomenons.
Oh,
like,
they're absolutely monsters of modernity, 100%.
Sure.
And you see that with, like, what was it? Syed Qutb, the influential Islamist who studied at like the University of Chicago at the same time that like all the neocons were going there, and kind of imbibed a lot of the same philosophical precepts. But he ended up kind of revolting against modernity, but also was like so heavily influenced by it.
He was radicalized by going to a church social where they played "Baby It's Cold Outside," which is one of the best passages of Syed Qutb. You know, I mean. He, like, you know, he's a complex figure. You know,
but definitely Bin Laden. I mean, he cut his teeth as basically a CIA operative. You know, in Afghanistan, and then I think later on we will do an episode about like the murkiness of his like 1990s movements. We can get a little more into like hard history there. I definitely want at some point talk about the Al Qaeda connection to Liberia, which was incorporated into a screenplay I wrote a few years ago. About the Liberian President Charles Gonke Taylor, and how there were reports that they were laundering up to $100 million in cash into blood diamonds in the Sierra Leone border regions where there was a civil war going on, and this was done under the auspices of confirmed former CIA asset / like brutal warlord Charles Taylor, and then was kind of like almost used as like a weapon against Taylor in the early 2000s, but then was like buried completely and like, oh, we're not going to talk about this anymore. But like there were all these like people that were wanted for the bombings of the Kenya and Tanzania embassies were like there, like passing along duffel bags to like basically make their assets liquid, because diamonds are one of the best money laundering vessels in the kind of pre-digital sense that you could have. You could shove a bag of them in your sock and, you know, smuggle like millions of dollars around. But like there was all kinds of weird kind of CIA tentacles. I mean, the Al Qaeda popped up in Bosnia and Kosovo, like with the Kosovo Liberation Army, which was like really into like drug trafficking, and as late as like the mid 90s, they were kind of on the same side as us in like the Yugoslav civil war. And then, just like something happened. It's not clear like what his, you know, we talk about like a little bit of the personality of this guy, Osama bin Laden, who allegedly masterminded all this shit. It's like not clear at what point he, you know, decided that we need to declare a global jihad against the United States, and kind of what really motivated that with him. Like, did he realize like they were the great Satan after all? Did he just want them out of the Persian Gulf? Like, was he just a silly boomer being used by the Saudi royal family to do things that they didn't want to be concretely associated with? Because a lot of the Saudi royals gave the hijackers money. That's come out. That's a fact. It's very like it just gets so kind of nefarious and murky. But maybe that's a different that's something
cool
we could tackle more.
episode, or it'd be cool to do an OBL episode, or something, about his work and his activities in the 90s or anything,
or the 80s and 90s, and
he's definitely responsible for the emergence of jihad as a term into our consciousness, which is in the title of our podcast.
It is. So
that's another thing about people just did not know anything about Islam or Muslims at all. No. Until it really, that is a huge transformation. I definitely didn't know what a Muslim was before 9/11, or anything like that. I didn't really know for a while afterwards, to be honest. But,
I was generally aware. I remember a history teacher kind of giving us kind of sitting us down, and he wrote the name. I still remember. I think his name was Bodhi Singh. And he was a gas station owner, I think, or a 7-Eleven owner in Arizona, who was a Sikh. And some guy walked in a few days after 9/11 and shot him in the head because he thought he was a Muslim.
Yeah.
And he explained to all of us that, and I only knew this because one of my friends growing up was half Sikh. So I knew that the turbans that the Sikhs wear are very different. They're not the same religion, and after they've had a lot of antagonism over the centuries. They might get offended if you misreligion them. And basically explained that that's why you don't just go targeting people. You don't just the Muslims did it. That's why you don't go out and be a fucking idiot and just shoot somebody who you think that's tremendously dangerous, and nobody should be doing that. And I think there was a big backlash in America, but also Bush, in contrast to somebody like Trump, really, maybe because he was such good friends with the Saudis, really downplayed the kind of critique against Islam in general, while simultaneously kind of promoting this sort of crusader narrative.
Yeah.
It was he was doing both things at the same time a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely popularized the idea of Islam as being the religion of peace, which I feel like most Muslims could definitely take or leave at the very least if they're not openly hostile to it. It's just something that really, I feel like people who hate Islam have more of an attachment to the idea, the meme of Islam as a religion of peace than Muslims do at this point, just because it's something whenever some Muslim does something, it's oh, the religion of peace again,
Oh, They say that more mockingly towards Islam than Muslims sincerely say about themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Most Muslims kind of acknowledge that we have a just war theory, most people do. We have an idea of violence being justified in some cases, and sometimes people apply that wrongly, But anyway, yeah.
I'm so high, I can hear heaven. I'm so high, I can hear heaven. Oh, but heaven, no heaven, don't hear me. And they say that a hero can save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold on to the wings of the eagles, watch as we all fly away. Someone told me love would all save us, but how can that be? Look what love gave us. A world full of killing and blood spilling that world never came. And they say that a hero can save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold on to the wings of the eagles, watch as we all fly away.
One of the, I think it's interesting to talk about, like, a little bit more about SK Bain's, like, environment, his work environment back at the Weekly Standard, and kind of emphasize some of the people he worked with, but so just Tucker Carlson. But one thing I definitely wanted to touch on, which I feel like is a big theme in conspiracy literature, especially that which is tinged with the occult, which I think SK Bain really captures, like the idea of like satanic mockery, which I think is like a very interesting but like very slippery concept, because when you deal with this, I'll read what he has to say about this. One of the key examples of it, for instance, that he uses is he talks about how like the landfill that a lot of the like wreckage was taken to was called like Fresh Kills on Staten Island. Yeah. So the idea is that like this is like, you know, satanic mockery, you know, and but of course
I could take it. I could take it or leave it.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing. It's like it can be a slippery slope where it's like, you know, it gets rid of the idea of like, oh, why would these people tip their hand in this way? You know, why would they like do this? And it's like, well, you know, they're intentionally rubbing it in your face. You know, so like I feel like that. But I think that there are some interesting ideas that, like, he gets into this through making a link between Sarasota, Florida, where the pilots were trained, and he says, yet another highly attractive aspect of Sarasota from an occult perspective is that in 1919, Ringling Brothers Circus established its winter home there. Performers and staff members began to settle in Sarasota, as did some of the 7 Ringling Brothers, all of whom were Masons. Decades later, in 1968, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Clown College located there as well, and new CIA recruits were reportedly sent to the college from Langley to learn sleight of hand. Clowns are modern incarnations of the trickster deity, of which Hermes, Pan, and Satan are all prime examples. The trickster clown is a Jungian archetype, and the most ancient clowns have been found in the 5th dynasty of Egypt. Though inverted speech, illogical actions, mimicry of spirits and animals, and ludicrous acrobatic stunts, clowns perform through them, functions attributed to tricksters in mythology, blurring boundaries, toying with social and sexual rules, and mixing the obscene with the sacred. There has emerged a much darker contemporary image of the clown, however, the evil clown, in which the playful trope of the clown is rendered disturbing through the use of horror elements and dark humor. Cultural critic Mark Derry has theorized the postmodern archetype of the evil clown in Cotton Candy Autopsy, Deconstructing the Psycho Killer Clowns. So, tracking the images of the demented, or deviant clown across popular culture, Derry analyzes Pogo the Clown, the persona of the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, the obscene clowns of the neo-situationist Cacophony Society, the Joker of Batman fame, the grotesque R.K. Sloan, the sick, funny Bobcat Goldthwait comedy Shakes the Clown, and Stephen King's It. Using Mikhail Bakhtin's theory of the Carnivalesque, which is like, you know, I kind of roll my eyes every time I hear that come up, because it's like the stock, like, academic theory and the, like, you know, thing to use in the humanities. But anyway,
the Carnivalesque.
Jungian and historical, writings on the images of the, especially in like their performance or theater, on the images of the fool and myth and history, and ruminations on the mingling of ecstasy and dread in the information age, Derry asserts the evil clown is an icon of our times. And yeah, I think that's definitely spot on. I mean, I feel like this article, which I haven't read, but I'd be interested to read, is like from a different order of like credibility from like the kind of conspiracy literature world, but the domain of like cultural critique or whatever. But I think that it would be interesting. I think it's definitely spot on in that. I think I like the idea of the evil clown as an, you know, there of course. Well,
I mean, like the evil clown. It's not been that long. I think it was in the fall of 2016 when there was a spate of bizarre evil clown sightings that were constantly popping up around the country. I remember kind of near where I grew up in the East Bay, an evil clown tried to take a woman's baby away from her outside of a Denny's, and she like beat up the clown and like he ran away. But like there was some really creepy shit going on in the fall of 2016 leading up to the ultimate clown, the ultimate orange clown. The ultimate Joker, a president Joker getting elected in a shocking, almost like I think some people did kind of experience it as kind of a psychic mini 9/11. People, a 9/11 of the soul in a way.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's I think when maybe next episode, depending on what our topic is, there could be some discussion of this, because I think that that's an interesting aspect of Trump as like kind of a clown figure, or what I always think about when I think about Trump. I'll talk about this later, but I think about the great parody as a concept from Rene Guénon. But like, but anyway, I think that idea is intriguing. I think that the line between like, what's sort of funny, like for instance, like phallic symbols, like obviously are very important, like the wasp scepter, in ancient Egypt or whatever, or Osiris with his like erect member, and like Ithyphallic
Baphomet with the staff of whose staff is it that is like his dick basically?
I don't know who staff of I don't know.
Might be Hermes. I don't know.
Maybe
something like that.
Asclepius. Is that what you're thinking about?
Might be.
Yeah,
it might be.
That's the kind of like medical symbol. But anyway, I don't know if
exactly the medical symbol, the two snakes around it.
But I think that it's like because a lot of the things that we consider ritually powerful also have like of course, because like big like dicks like phallics like that are like funny, like in ancient Greek satyr plays, things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think that and of course
the big phallic twin towers.
And in Kenneth Anger and stuff like you can definitely see like and that's kind of what I think we've been talking about through this whole podcast. Like, through all the episodes, and it'll continue to be a theme. Like, whenever you talk about especially in this, like, in our modern day, when you talk about, like, the occult, or you talk about symbology, you talk about these things, like, trying to reconcile with, like, science, or, like, being serious or whatever, like, there's this, like, patine over it of, like, oh, well, you can't be serious. Like, that's, so I think
I think he said in one of the other quotes that, like, that 20th century mankind, even though they think they've dispelled these sort of superstitious, secret ritual kind of ways of, affecting the world, that they're actually all the more susceptible to it. Because one, there's technology that can kind of do it to you in a much more effective way. And secondly, just the sort of the ontological like framework of modernity makes you so much less able to believe that these things could exist outside of a traditional kind of scientific framework, and thus makes us much more susceptible to being psychologically manipulated, whether there's any like real quote unquote magic involved or not. If it has an effect on you, it's a phenomenon that's worth looking at.
Experience is like the level that I always like take this on. Like, when people say like, oh, well, you're not really possessed by a demon. Well, if someone is experiencing themselves as being possessed by a demon, like all that you fucking say doesn't matter. You saying like, oh, that's not true, demons aren't real. Like, well, if someone is experiencing demonic possession, then like all you're like, grandstanding about like whatever like beliefs.
That's a good point. Has
like,
a demonic
it doesn't matter. Like,
has an exorcism ever been performed with facts and logic successfully?
Like that's the thing. Like, if you can like do something where like you use your scientific knowledge to make this person say like, oh wow, like the demon's gone, like I guess I wasn't really, or like I guess you were right, then maybe that's like different. But like that very rarely, I don't know if that ever happens.
I mean, I'm not even talking about using like facts and logic in the terms of like using real medicine or like medical techniques, but I mean like literally sitting with somebody and explaining to them that they're being religious and that demons aren't real. Like, can you talk somebody out of feeling like they're demonically possessed by just using like rational secular logic? I don't think that works.
You usually can't do that by using actual psychotherapy and like psychiatric medicine a lot of the time. A lot of the time that's not 100% effective in making people believe that they're not possessed either. So certainly sitting down and explaining, but that's like a little bit of a digression.
This lack of self-control I fear is never ending. Controlling, I can't seem to find myself again. My walls are closing in.
Without a sense of confidence, I'm convinced that there's just too much pressure to take.
I've felt this way before, so insecure.
In a matter of seconds, the skyscraper collapsed and was gone.
Confusing all is real.
of the 400 firefighters who first reached the scene may be dead.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
10,000 people in each tower would typically be in there on a normal business day. And we get about another 5,000 visitors during the course of the entire day. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the building should have been full.
Terrorism has been alive and well throughout the rest of the world for a very, very long time. And you can point to it in many different places. And it's come to our shores big time now. We need to understand that.
I think we would be remiss in all this before we go if we did not mention an aspect of Most Dangerous Book in the World, 9/11 as Mass Ritual, which was something that SK Bain termed Black Christmas. And this is when SK Bain, having laid out the sort of supposed occult script for 9/11, uses those same tools to predict when the next major Luciferian mass ritual terrorist attack was going to happen. And would you like to give an overview of that?
In extreme detail.
It's almost it got replaced and put. I think it was in the first edition of the book. It was like it probably constituted like the second half of it. To be honest, it's so much. But then they moved it to the appendix because, as we will see, Black Christmas in 2012 did not happen.
Yes, it was supposed to be like a nuclear attack in Phoenix, Arizona. Again, which would again be blamed on Muslims. Yeah, basically, maybe it was moved to the appendix, but the extent of it in the edition that you can find on Scribd still is the same. Like, he has the same number the same amount of analysis of this fictional event as he does of 9/11.
And almost more so in some respects.
Yeah, so
he goes deeper into it.
Yeah, and he, to his credit, I don't know if you want to put this to his credit or not, but to his something, he has not backed down from the idea that even though it didn't come true, is valuable. He still says it should have happened or something. It made so much sense that it should have happened. We need to understand why it didn't happen, and that's why we need to analyze. This. Did
he ever postulate that it was the publication of his book by Trinde in 2012 that perhaps exposed this thing before it happened and then led to them calling an audible and not doing it?
I don't know if he has said that, but I think that maybe in one of the introductions to it, someone said we can only hope. And I think that maybe he at first said I hope by publishing this, something will prevent this from happening. I'm trying to look back now into his into the Black Christmas appendix to see. SK Bain loves his witty sort of satirical titles, and of course this event was supposed to occur on Christmas Day, so the first chapter is ho ho holy shit. But anyway, in the foreword, which I guess this actually is SK Bain's foreword. Peter Levenda wrote another intro to this, but the foreword, he says if only we had been able to use the occult script from 9/11 to decode their plans sooner in advance, maybe, just maybe, this might have allowed us to stop their next act of false flag terror. If only. So he's writing as if it has happened, but he's kind of saying if only we had done this, but now it's already happened, because it's all in the past tense, it's already actually occurred.
It's preordained in a way.
Yeah, Peter Levenda also wrote a foreword to that. Yeah, it's very interesting when he connects it with, theater. He talks about, haven't we finally realized that taking off our shoes and belts at the airports is nothing more than theater? And isn't the root of theater ritual itself? Yes.
That's kind of it reminds you of some of the things people say about Corona and wearing a mask and 6 feet. Why is it 6 feet? Is this kind of ritual indoctrination?
I don't know. I mean, I guess but definitely I've heard all this stuff about the mark of the beast and stuff going on with that.
Gates.
But
microchip.
No, it's a pretty pedestrian comment, but I think it's super important to the performative aspect, and this is certainly a very performative appendix. He definitely has a performative and dramatic streak, SK Bain, where he talks about Black Christmas, like, with all this gusto. Like, you gotta, it really takes something to be able to, like, put so much confidence in the idea that this is gonna happen. He really,
it's not something that people were necessarily, calling for or kind of demanding that he do, but he went out and did it anyways, and kind of blew up in his face. But I mean, it's about half the book that you can find on Scribd is the appendix, most of which has to do with his predictions. And, obviously there's a ton of symbolism with the phoenix, the mythical bird. I don't know. I didn't see him mention the Phoenix program in Vietnam. That seemed that would be a natural fit.
Yeah, actually, in Googling around about SK Bain, getting ready for this episode, I found, like, one guy complaining that SK Bain kind of fingered people like W as being, like, the high priest, and he's like, what about Aquino? He doesn't mention him at all. So, like,
that is almost suspicious. Like, how do you miss that? I said in the Aquino episode, if you dig around conspiracy theories and dark occult stuff long enough online, you will run into Aquino pretty quickly, and it's funny that he didn't.
Maybe he's mentioned in his new book on Satan. I haven't read it. Maybe I should have before this.
Neither
but
have I.
yeah, if not, perhaps I don't know. But yeah, you'd think that he would come across him because he still, like, runs a conspiracy blog, which I think is, like, the most dangerous blog in the world or something. But yeah. I think that maybe we have some audio from your SK Bain performance of the discussion of Black Christmas.
Where the operator gets a call and it's just a man, like, muttering Allahu Akbar again and again, like in prayer. The blast radius, like, blinded everybody for miles, and it was very I'll probably play some of that.
December 25th, 2012, Phoenix, Arizona. The unmarked white lorry-style delivery van traveled south down Interstate 17, taking the Capitol exit and then turning onto 17th Street, again traveling south until it stopped directly in front of the Arizona State Capitol building at 1700 West Washington Street. The driver sat motionless, eyes tightly closed, repeating Allahu Akbar, God is great, over and over to the 911 operator. 8:15 a.m. The sun glinted off the circular stainless steel band that was the primary element of Arizona's 9/11 memorial, situated in the park directly in front of the Capitol. Then, a brilliant, instantaneous flash, appearing as a second sun, superheating the air around it. The fireball traveled outward at unimaginable speed, incinerating almost everything in its path. In the surrounding blast zones, the horror was unspeakable. The suffocating heat, the smoke-filled air, the screams of the injured, the moans of the dying. Those nearest the blast who had survived and managed to make their way out of the burning buildings couldn't get their bearings. All familiar landmarks had disappeared. They wandered aimlessly in a choking sea of smoke. A literal hell on earth.
And this is...
it's extremely detailed. Like, he, like, makes up fake quotes by, like, Janet Napolitano and stuff like that, as the morning
he touches on all kinds of things that were going on at the time, and it's kind of an interesting rewind now that we live in sort of the Q-infested, world that we do now, of seeing kind of like 2012 era conspiracy theories. He dedicates no small amount of time to sort of debunking what was very popular back then, which was kind of this obsession with the Mayan apocalypse in December 21st, 2012, right. Which is also the winter solstice, but according to, like, the Mayan calendar, was going to be this shifting of aeons, or a kind of apocalyptic event, though it was mostly like white people who didn't know much about Mayan astrology or culture, kind of making these kind of goofy claims, but you could see it all over. It was kind of in the air, like we mentioned in the last episode, like History Channel. That was around the time they started putting a bunch of, like, ancient aliens and kind of 2012 type, pop history documentaries. All over the airwaves. So, it wasn't weird back then for some, bro, like, what do you think, man? 2012, yo, it's crazy. But SK Bain, like, really, he said that is obviously foolish, And he pivoted in a hard, different direction and said, no, you don't understand. Like, it's not going to be the 21st. It's going to be the 25th. It's going to be Christmas 2012.
Yes. He was like, it's funny because he actually says, like, very, correctly, given that mainstream Mayan scholars never support the notion that the culture had viewed this date as anything other than the end of one block of time and the beginning of another. The Mayans created a sophisticated system of interlocking calendar markings marking various increments of time. And December 21st, 2012 merely corresponded to the end of 13 Baktun, Baktun being a period of 144,000 days. So it's funny that, like, he is able to, see this, like, with such clarity, some of the, but he talks because the date of Christmas has that special power. He says, like, despite all the jokes about nuking Christmas and the like, there was in their black minds an unmatchable beauty in using the power that fuels the sun to make a most fitting mass sacrifice by immolation to the true light bearer upon the dawning of the new great age, the age of Lucifer. So yes, he is all in on Black Christmas and.
He brings up, like, the Gabby Giffords shooting and kind of alludes to that perhaps, like, the shooter of that, Jared Loeffner, was a victim of mind control, which actually is something that actually, if you've ever seen his creepy YouTube videos from back, I remember back in the day looking at those before I was really sort of MK pilled, and, like, it was like all these, like, weird kind of, like, theorems that were like I am, like, the mind controller is the controller of the mind.
Yeah, he kept talking about the mind controller.
I control the mind, therefore I am the mind controller.
Yeah, that was,
like,
so I remember.
And then there was, like, he burned an American flag out in the desert and put the Body song by Drowning Pool over it, and he was, like, wearing a mask or something, and just, like, completely like, there's a whole rash of like these mass shooters around that era that seemed very, like, bizarrely MK'd, and maybe, we could go back again the other day, but he was referencing a lot of things like that, and, like, the fact that, like, her husband was a twin and they were both astronauts, and, there's probably some weird serious connection to that.
Yeah.
And actually, one interesting, like, side note about it is he spends a few chapters doing a pretty thorough takedown of Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the sheriff of Maricopa County in Arizona, and talks about, like, the sort of concentration camp conditions, and also the fact that he was, like, kind of this, like, publicity whore for basically what people forget, but, like, the one public official in the country that was really on, like, the Obama birth certificate circuit and was making a big stink about it was Joe Arpaio. And I just want to read a little bit here from one of the appendices titled Bread and Circus, where Bain writes, Arpaio launched himself smack into the middle of a sideshow tent already filled with too many quirky characters to list, although we must acknowledge on-again, off-again ringleader Donald Trump, who for quite some time seemed no more able to make up his mind whether Obama was eligible or ineligible than whether or not he was going to run for president himself. For those following the story closely during those years, it certainly seemed probable that, if not for the birther issue in general, and Sheriff Joe in particular, a saga complete with suspicion-generating birth certificates and oddly missing records, internet news site WorldNet Daily would have gone slap out of business, as the Birther Nerve Center featured stories on one related topic after another in a never-ending torrent of coverage. WND CEO Joseph Farah even went so far as to encourage people to donate to Arpaio's investigation of Obama. And it says at the end, like, quote, he puts in air quotes, patriots everywhere were washed in the digital ink of conspiratorial enlightenment and nourished by the truth of subversives revealed. However, it is all simply scripted entertainment, polarizing the masses. And I'll be damned if that does not sound an awful lot like, I think, as maybe we've referenced before, of, like, the QAnon phenomenon, and even features, as we've said, like, Donald Trump was the sort of ringleader of this circus of birtherism, and was kind of the thing that made him sort of anathema to liberals and embraced by the Republican Party and the kind of Tea Party, really the more conspiratorial kind of Glenn Becky fringe of the Republican Party. And now is, like, flowering where, quote-unquote, patriots washed in the digital ink of conspiratorial enlightenment are, like, going to kill themselves if Joe Biden wins, because like we read in that article the other day. You know, people are so believing in Q that they're willing to like
do the garage and leave the car on if Joe Biden wins. Yeah, we'll discuss that.
That's coming up soon. We're gonna do a whole Q thing, but I just thought it was funny that SK Bain points out this kind of Arpaio Donald Trump connection and sort of sees it as a sideshow that specifically is drawing attention to Arizona in preparation for getting nuked on Black Christmas.
Yeah, that's the thing about SK Bain, because, you know, of course, like, he also talks about how Obama is, like, Amun-Ra, like, reborn, and, like, how his name is obviously supposed to be, like, a ritualistic, like, reversal in the same way that, like, 9/11 is a reversal of, like, the help number, you know, like, it psychologically destroys people because it switches 9/11 to terror, like, switching Obama, Hussein, the good guy from Osama, and Hussein the bit, like, you know, it's
true.
So, but yeah, he just like he's so, but you know, like that said, like he just throws everything against the wall, and like there's definitely some, like, you know, yeah, there's definitely some stuff of value in SK Bain, and I will give him credit. You know, he's always been, you know, like dismissive of the paranoia about Muslims. You know, he's always said like Muslims aren't responsible, and like the horrible crusades that will ensue after Black Christmas like will truly be like you know, they'll make Afghanistan and Iraq look like nothing, and they'll truly be a travesty, you know.
Yeah, he does seem to have like these kind of bumper rails that I think are. It's always great when you see somebody who's like willing to be a really far out conspiracy researcher like not fall for that. Like what about the Jews? You know, or like Muslims. Like, are they really just a satanic religion that, you know, blah blah blah. Like eventually. Like they're, you know, like they say, they're so open-minded that your brain falls out. The people used to say about San Franciscans, and then embrace, and then like they kind of get lost in like the funhouse of mirrors and can't discern anymore. But like Bain, to his credit, is very kind of laser focused on these kind of, and he says at a point like Anglo-American conspiracy of Luciferians and Freemasons and Thelemites and people of that nature.
And that like goes on,
which I think is closer to the truth of what we're getting at.
Yeah, and it get like that will go off like in every conceivable direction with every possible association. But yeah, like there definitely is like a, you know, there's definitely like he keeps on the even keel with that type, and he doesn't necessarily pick on any particular group other than that, you know, other than the Luciferians themselves. Who,
the elites,
you know,
basically, which is not a bad kind of rule to stick to. I think if you're looking at, like, you know, you don't want to single out entire populations of people that, you know, supposedly have some kind of, you know, certain people within that gigantic group have some nefarious associations, you know, it's like, and usually I think when you do find the connections, it's like, okay, yes, like 15 of them, of the hijackers were Saudi, but like, let's step back a second and think about like, what is the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States, particularly like both at the economic, military, intelligence kind of level. And you see like, then you can see how kind of different that milieu that was interacting with the U.S. government was from kind of just like Muslims broadly defined. Like this is a very discrete, specific, and kind of, in a way, kind of both elite and fringy group that, you know, it has almost more to do with, like you could pin some of it on Wahhabi doctrine, but even Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia is so heavily tied in with the economic and political and military relationships that, you know, the Saudi royal family has with the United States, that it's kind of, you know, to put too much of an emphasis on like, you know, like ISIS is extremely Islamic, you know, that kind of stuff is, you're barking up like a wrong tree, basically. If you start to do
He's
that.
Definitely more correct than Graham would in that respect. And and I like, he also like doesn't have any like obvious political bias. Like I think his experience like with the neocons, like for whatever reason has like set him, you know, where he definitely doesn't spare like anyone on the left, you know, but he also like isn't like Alex Jones where he's like, folks, Trump's a patriot, you know, like like you know,
Trump's for real.
Yeah, exactly.
He's for real.
Yeah, like globalist, man. Like, you know, like
hate his guts.
Yeah, exactly. Like folks they're gonna kill him. He's a dead man, folks. You know, like,
he's got bullseye.
Yeah, like crying, like it's over, folks. Trump's dead. Trump's dead. Like,
It took all the footage off my TV. Said it's too disturbing for you and me. It'll just breed anger. That's what the experts say. If it was up to me, I'd show it every day. Some say this country's just out looking for a fight. Well, after 9/11, man, I'd have to say that's right. Have you forgotten how it felt that day to see your homeland under fire and her people blown away? Have you forgotten when those towers fell? We had neighbors still inside, going through a living hell, and we vowed to get the ones behind Bin Laden. Have you forgotten?
But yeah, like
Yeah, there's a lot of
but
that.
Yeah, like he thinks Trump is like a fucking Satanist. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's interesting. Like, if you read his follow-up book to this, like, which you get a little bit of hint of, I guess, in the revised edition of Most Dangerous Book in the World, which is on Scribd, you can see, like, he does, like, a post-prediction, like, wrap-up about how he he underestimated their obsession with Sirius, because December 25th isn't linked enough with Sirius, so that's why. But, yeah, in Most Dangerous, he kind of goes more into his own self. It's a very weird book because it's like an autobiography written in the third person, and it's about how he feels that his son had these like sort of grand mal seizures that he felt like were caused or induced by what people who were threatened by his book. And he got like a mysterious note in his mail which had like a picture of a poppy field on it or something, like, and he was like, Poppy, like the Wizard of Oz, like, no,
also
Poppy,
Poppy
yeah, exactly.
Bush.
Yeah, that's the connection that he ultimately like made.
And to be fair, there is a interesting track record of journalists and writers and whistleblowers and things like that who go after the Bush family a little bit too hard, just end up having not great things happening to them, often ending up with like mysterious suicides and or like sudden onset cancers and things like that. So, hard to really say. You can also start getting seizures in young adulthood. It doesn't necessarily, it can happen at any time. So it's not impossible, but he saw it as a sign, basically.
It's definitely not impossible, but yeah, that's definitely how he interpreted it. And yeah, he canceled his book, like Carnival USA, like Funhouse of Terror or whatever that he was working on, because he was afraid, or like, he was effectively shut up by that. But he is still going strong. He has a new book out, and yeah, in Most Dangerous, he kind of indicts a lot of the people, like, we talked about Bill Kristol, like John Podhoretz, like Tucker Carlson. Just looking at his Most Dangerous blog in the world, .wordpress.com, that he has right now, like, he's, got these sort of memes that I guess he made of Tucker Carlson saying, like, this was what Tucker Carlson said when I asked him to endorse my new book, and it's just like him laughing or whatever, like, SK Bain's former colleague, Tucker Carlson, like, and stuff like that. So I guess he kind of has a vendetta against him. He mentioned in Most Dangerous that he sent him a copy of the Most Dangerous Book in the World to like review or something, and spent like $20 on the stamp or something like that, or like some and Tucker Carlson never wrote him back, so he apparently was,
I see this here. It says on his blog, Fox News' Tucker Carlson endorses SK Bain's latest book, Blackjack. And then, there's the meme of him laughing.
Yes.
And that is, Blackjack, the dawning of the new great age of Satan.
Yes. He has a little PDF here, I guess, which is kind of about COVID, called Breathless. It has an amazing first sentence, which is, as 9/11 was unfolding, were you aware that it was a false flag operation employing sophisticated psychological warfare techniques, doubling as an in-plain-sight global ritual? Neither was I. But that was almost 20 years ago, and I've learned a lot since then. Yeah. So, yeah, and I guess he goes on. He seems to be very fixated with the Hunger Games as, like, sort of a mockery of the actual human sacrifices that are being performed.
Interesting, kind of a reality TV format.
Yeah,
and a return to feudalism and kind of monarchy. It is a spooky book series that kind of, I mean, it's ostensibly against all of those things, but
yes,
opportune timing for it to kind of come out after 2008. And the war in Iraq. I think the author said she was kind of inspired by watching nightly reports of, like, the war in Iraq in, like, the 2000s, and kind of seeing where, like, American society was going in this, like, militarized, like, fucked up direction.
Yeah, he has SK Bain has an analysis in his breathless PDF of Trump's, like, Bible photo op thing that he did, saying that he's doing, like, a high priest gesture here.
I see here he's going in on Trump, and he's talking about meme warfare.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's talking about Trump, Donald Trump, Orange Man bad, funny, sorta, but you'll get the inside joke shortly. And then he has a logo of the Orange Order. The Orange Order is an international Masonic-style fraternity founded in 1795 as a tribute to Protestant King William of Orange, who defeated the army of Catholic King James II in the late 1600s. Members are known as Orange Men. I mean, we know that. Like, most Protestant fraternal societies take the name Orange Man, and he is a Scottish Protestant. Trump, on his mom's side.
Orange Man.
Yeah. Widely known for its annual marches, the largest of which each year is around July 12th, the 12th, and marks the anniversary of, King William's victory. The order is headed by the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, but has lodges in England, the U.S., and elsewhere, including Scotland. Incidentally, it was recently reported in the media that due to COVID-19, the Grand Orange Lodge of Scotland planned to hold a virtual 12th this year. And it says, King of the Memes. The evening of Sunday, July 12th, 2020, brought the sad news of the 27-year-old death of Benjamin Coe, the grandson of Elvis Presley, who committed suicide on July 12th. And I can only assume that he's going to say that was connected, that was a sacrifice of some kind. I am actually, just as a little side note, I am curious to know whether or not Donald Trump is a Mason, because I've heard it alleged. Like, many presidents have been Freemasons, some openly, some not so openly. But it would, when you're trying to answer the question mark of, like, which powerful people in America are behind Trump, because a lot of them seem exoterically to be against him, I wonder if there's any Freemasonic connections in there that, if there's, a Freemasonic kind of civil war going on.
He is very proud of his Scottish heritage, so, yeah, maybe. It might be worth looking into, but yeah.
He has a golf course there, yeah.
Scottish Rite and everything. It seems like...
Scottish Rite. I mean, also, Albert Pike is quoted, multiple times in SK Bain's book, and maybe we should do a deep dive on him one day, because, he was a Confederate Army general, rumored to be the co-founder of the KKK, and it, even, I think, still has, a statue of him in Washington, D.C. We're tearing down all these statues of Confederate war heroes. Oh, but the guy who was, the resurrector of the Scottish Rite and the 33rd degree Master Mason, no, that guy's cool, we respect him, great state builder, whatever, who was incredibly racist and worshiped Lucifer. Pretty in Morals and Dogma, his most famous book. Pretty SK Bain quotes a lot of quotes of Pike's that are floweringly very Crowleyan in their worship of the Illuminated One.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of very provocative stuff on the Most Dangerous blog in the world, which I won't endorse, but there is this heartwarming post-partisan statement here that maybe can get us back to the way we felt on 9/12, when we were all one country. He says, time is almost up. If you're still waiting for life to return to normal or for your candidate of choice to win the presidency and save the country from certain doom, all I can say is that you're in for a very rough couple of years. A liberal or conservative hell on earth would by definition be heaven on earth for the party in charge. Rest assured, however, that the game plan is for hell on earth exclusively, one that transcends all boundaries, political and otherwise, and in which we will all suffer together.
Wow.
Seems like he set the date for the Great Age of Satan to 2022 is the new date that he's going with for now.
Wait, is he making a prediction again?
He seems to be on 2022 now is the dawning of the new Great Age of Satan. So I don't know if that means an attack or what, but he definitely is throwing that date out there.
Yeah, and he didn't predict anything. He didn't predict COVID, right?
No,
as far as we know,
predict it. No, as far as we know, I don't know if he'll say that he did. If you read more deeply into his work, but as far as I know, he didn't predict that there would be a pandemic. Yeah.
Well, I think like a lot with SK Bain, that feels like maybe his specifics or something that I'm going to take with a big fistful of salt, but his general intuition, his feeling that no matter who you vote for, the dawning age of Satan is what's coming down the pike, and the idea that voting for one of these candidates is going to give you heaven and the other one's going to give you that half the country is going to be in heaven as a result of a candidate winning and half will be in hell is almost too optimistic, and that it's going to be hell for just about everybody except the very richest and most powerful people that rule our country. So I'll give a qualified endorsement of that sentiment, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I hope this was an unorthodox and somewhat illuminating exploration of various, phenomena and themes around 9/11. Can't say, we've gotten to the bottom of it, but who has really?
And we'll definitely be revisiting this event, I'm sure, from various angles. But this is definitely an important text for us.
It is. And to think of these kind of spectacular crisis events as a kind of as a sort of opera or thinking of the performative aspect of it, I think is an important thing to do, because
now it's a super important idea, and you need an SK Bain to really go balls to the wall with it to make it to put it out there. A lot of people have floated it, but it's it takes him to really take a stand for it, I think.
Yes. He threw some hand grenades into the discourse and got people to consider things on a deeper level, even if his specific predictions are not bearing themselves out or go off in weird directions that don't really matter. I think his sort of heuristic and his framework for looking at some of these things is something that in the mass media age and the age of distributed network imperialism that we have to at least consider and entertain.
Yeah, and it's I feel like a lot of people, definitely he belongs to the world that we routinely engage with on the podcast of the conspiratorial fringe. And the, and of course they get a lot of people in that domain, which I guess we're kind of adjacent to as well, get a lot of criticism, but a lot of the time people who are more credible are also flailing and also saying stuff that doesn't make any sense or is absurd. And yes, it's more outrageous, it's more wild to be weaving these massive conspiracy theories, but these this massive occult script, and then to extrapolate it into a fully realized nuclear Luciferian attack that didn't happen. That's a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of false predictions. I mean, we witnessed them in 2016. We witnessed a lot of there's false predictions proliferating all the time, I think. And
I mean, yeah, like Hillary's
wacky
going to
ideas
win.
proliferating all the time. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll talk in like our QAnon episode kind of about like even the flip side of like Blue Anon, if you will, of the kind of like Robert Mueller is going to put on his leather jacket and march down the White House and like drag Trump out kicking and screaming and throw him in jail for being a KGB spy. And it's like, you know, and then, you know, like exactly. I think the when prophecy fails, which is a thing that comes up again and again with a lot of our episodes. I think that it's definitely the case with QAnon, and also the case of kind of the polar opposite of QAnon, which is like that, you know, our brave patriots in the CIA, same dynamic, are going to, you know, launch a righteous coup to like get Moscow Donnie Drumpf out of the White House, you know, for, you know, being, you know, a compromat agent.
Yeah, or even going back to 9/11 itself, like, you know, Osama bin Laden's like high tech, like, you know, Spectre style, like mountain fortress where he's hiding.
I saw the picture of that today, like an illustration of it. It was ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, like that type of stuff. Or like, you know, there's going to be a 9/11 like every month, like they're going to be lighting off all these dirty, like, you know, and stuff like that. There's like so much stuff like that, and yeah, a lot, like, you know, and I think that, yeah, like, there, you know, people like Baudrillard, things like that, people have analyzed this or appreciated 9/11 for its dimension, but yeah, it's kind of like it's performative or theatrical dimension, but it's kind of, you know, a taboo to sort of touch, but it's something that I think, yeah, it is important to talk about, like, and it's something that's swept under the rug and not culted, but something that's important to engage with.
Yes, and it's in a lot of ways an extension of the principles of mind war, that as, you know, as war evolves in a more sort of technotronic way in the 21st century, that these are going to become, you know, propaganda, spectacular violence, spectacles. The crisis spectacle plays a very important role in, you know, pursuing the objectives of the people that have the power to move events and shape history and you know, make things happen, which is kind of all that magic is, right? It's the process of making things happen through will. It's
the idea of things being more than the sum of their parts, like you said earlier, you know, putting parts together and then making something more than that, you know.
And since we
gestures and then making this, you know.
Exactly. And since we don't have access to the academic sort of like internal records of the Pentagon or the CIA or, you know, even Freemasons or anything else for that matter, we almost are stuck in a sort of philosophical position where we kind of have to speculate a little bit about their capabilities and their operations and stuff, because even if you wanted to prove it in a, you know, quote, like kind of peer-reviewed academic kind of way or an ironclad journalistic kind of way, it's almost impossible, and it might even be more dangerous to sort of, you know, talk to a few sources who tell you a version of what's going on and then give yourself a false sense of certainty about what happened. You see that with, I don't know, magazines like The Nation, or like you see it with The Intercept sometimes, where they are kind of like exposing the CIA, but then kind of being very credulous, and like they're always very willing to accept like the bumbling CIA narrative of like, I actually exposed that like they didn't want me to say this because it would embarrass them, that they actually just suck at everything, and like nothing's ever their fault. By, you know, by implication, nothing's really their fault because they're so incompetent. So there's all kinds of traps people can fall into with this stuff. So I think I'm happy that we dove into the deep end and tried to extract some.
It had to happen. I think that this is like, you know, one of the, like, to me, like truly, like, you know, creme de la creme, like conspiracy tomes. Like the title is just like so bold, like, you know, especially the subtitle, like the concept, you know, and I just think that, like, you know, for like whatever you like, that deserves a tip of the hat, I think, you know, like you can hedge it as much as you want, but I think that the concept is very fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Evil men, by hatred driven, wreaked havoc on the living. Ignorance fed by the devil's preaching turned the hearts of a few into a ruthless band bent on leaving millions weeping, weeping, weeping. He worked hard for the Bank of Boston, this young clerk named Jimmy Johnson. The thrifty ways his mother taught helped him save for the tickets he bought. He was last in line for vacation time, but he was happy as can be when they said you can have the second week in September. Thank you was his reply, that will be fine. He built a playhouse on the 9th and 10th and made reservations for the 11th. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go see Mickey Mouse. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go to Disneyland. Yes, my pretty little darling girl, that's my master plan. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go fly. It was warm on that Tuesday morning. They didn't know there would be no warning. The door was closed, the engines wound. Nobody knew these poor souls would never be found. They never knew why the plane changed its course, winging its way into history. Only God knows why the innocent were sent to die. We must never forget they died for us. He built a playhouse on the 9th and 10th and made reservations for the 11th. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go see Mickey Mouse. Daddy, we go fly. Daddy, we go to Disneyland. Yes, my pretty little darling girl, that's my master plan.